So the question I have is, what happened to the two rivers? Join me as I walk through some of my thoughts on the Wheel of Time episode 1 to 3 through this video, and you can watch some of my creation of some of my Wheel of Time art. I've got some process videos, recordings, time-lapse for you to watch while I discuss this with you. Alright, let's jump in. So I think I want to do something a little bit different today. If you haven't watched the Wheel of Time yet, I apologize. This is going to be a little bit spoilery, probably, but I wanted to do a little bit of kind of a miniature review, just giving some of my thoughts on the first 3 episodes, which released on the 19th on Friday on Amazon Prime. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, feel free to turn this off or turn the audio down and just scrub through and check out the video of the piece coming together if you like. I won't be offended. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. Overall, I enjoyed the Wheel of Time TV show so far, the first 3 episodes. I didn't hate it. I was a little bit put off by a few of the decisions that they made. For people who aren't fans of the book, previously not having any connection to the characters, I think that probably the TV show will come off a little bit easier, or they may enjoy it more. There were parts that I really liked and some parts that I found challenging. I think the things that stuck out to me the most as a negative was some of the decisions that they made in the writing around specifically the 2 rivers, which is the little village that the main characters of the story live in at the outset of the story. So the 2 rivers, I feel, in the books is presented with this very rich and special culture that seems to be very, pretty much quite unified. There's the oddball kind of group of people that are difficult, that that are sort of, I guess, difficult to deal with, and so everybody knows, about the Coplands and the Congers. They're just difficult people. And of course there's Will Alcine, who's like this guy that the boys kind of struggle with. But anyways, I just was put off by the way that they depicted Matt's parents and his family dynamic. So I'm going to talk about what I felt was negative about the depiction of the 2 rivers people, and then I'm going to talk about the reasons why they did it, and how I understand from a writing perspective in adapting this to the medium of television that they went that route. So I took an exception to the way that they depicted specifically Abel Cawthon and Natty Cawthon. And the problem for me is that Abel is, in the books, a really close friend with Tam Althor, who is Rand Althor's father. And they are both members of the village council, which is the equivalent of the women's circle. And so, and it's interesting. So, in the 2 rivers, there's sort of an equality of importance between men and women. They have different roles, but they're equally as important as each other. And they're both involved in sort of politics within the village and certain responsibilities. And it just seemed, the depiction to me of the 2 rivers felt very one-sided. They showed the women's circle, they showed the ceremony for Egwene, and they seemed very unified. And then the men seemed kind of scattered and not really unified. And I sort of blame that on pacing and writing. And then this is the hard part that I'll get into, but I felt that they sort of short-handed, I guess, the village council. And Abel Cawthon was this really messed up guy, and I always pictured him as being, he's said to be like one of the best archers, and he's really excellent with a bow staff, and is really swift-minded and a very good trader for like horse trader. And I kind of just got the depiction of him as being like this deadbeat, lecherous drunk, which was really unfortunate and sad. And then his wife Natty was also like, she looked like she was strung out on drugs and like just a mess. So that was disappointing, and it wasn't just those two characters. Like the dynamic between those two characters, I didn't like that, the way they set that up, and I felt like it didn't feel like an accurate depiction of the culture of the two rivers, and I think that it kind of extended even to like Matt stealing a bracelet from one of the townsfolk in the town there. And I just don't like, I know Matt's like this goofy guy who likes to do things in the book. He's kind of getting in trouble, releasing badgers in the town square and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I always got the impression that it was out of this sort of crazy zeal for life and not really thinking about what he's doing before he does it, not necessarily a malicious intent of stealing. And I think that he was stealing stuff to get money to provide some opportunities for his sisters that his parents weren't providing for him. So they used his parents' dysfunction to try to set up an opportunity for him to seem sympathetic and maybe to like build empathy towards him as a character. And there might be payoff for that later on down the road in relationship to his sisters. Maybe he makes amends with his family. We don't know yet that's gonna look like, how they're gonna work with that. But there's a lot of themes in the books about the two rivers being of the old blood and strong, and the people there are stubborn and strong and rebuilding right after the Trolloc attack and working together and very unified, and all these sort of pieces coming, like working together. And I just didn't feel that from the way they depicted the two rivers. That was one of my biggest struggles in the first few episodes, was how they chose to do that. But again, so I think I know why they chose to do that. I understand why they're making decisions like having Perrin have a wife and then have that tragedy that happened. I feel like the first episodes could have been extended into 2 episodes and had one first episode kind of getting to know everybody and getting to know those relationships and connections, and the second episode being sort of the attack at Winter Night. It would have allowed for a little bit more viewer buy-in into the tragedies that happened. Maybe they could have established a little bit more of the connection between Perrin and his wife. It felt very abrupt and not really solidified. And so that's just, I think, a byproduct of trying to adapt this huge book series to TV show, which is really difficult. So kind of unfortunate that just some of those decisions would have been extremely difficult for the writers to make. And I'm not saying that I could have done it better. I'm just saying I think it didn't really work for me, those pieces. And it wasn't just me. So my wife watched the show with me, and she's never read the books, and she felt that she had a hard time buying into the emotions in the first episode, the dynamics between Rand and Egwene, what was going on with Perrin and his wife, Tam and Rand, and like him getting injured and almost dying. All those pieces, she just was like, she said, I felt like it was like I was being forced to try to empathize with these people that I know nothing about. And it was kind of like jarring for her. So I think that's important, right? Someone who, she likes good stories. She likes stories about community and about relationships and stuff. So those pieces of things were kind of falling flat for her. So it's important to honestly reflect on that. And then, I asked her, without soliciting a response, I just said, what did you think about the culture of the two rivers? Like how it was depicted. What did you get from that? And she was like, well, she said, I think the women were really cool. And I felt they were very strong and really cool. And she said, the men suck. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm kind of glad that you said that, because that's how I felt they depicted the two rivers. She said, the innkeeper was nice, and Tam seemed kind of cool and noble and stuff, but all the other guys seemed like drunkards and not great. And so that was unfortunate, because that's not how I imagined the two rivers people. I imagined the two rivers being this sort of idyllic space or place with people with like strong backbone and rich culture and tradition and all those pieces behind them. She did like that they showed them kind of like celebrating a little bit when the dance started before murder happened. I just think that they could have done more, and maybe they'll get a chance to if they keep it sort of in a similar structure to the books, and Perrin ends up, doing what he does. Maybe we'll see more, and they'll flesh some of that stuff out a little bit more. But that honestly was like the biggest concern for me from the first. I really thought episode 2 and 3 were picking up a little better. The actor performances of the characters I felt were starting to get really tight. I like the casting. I think they're doing a good job with the characters. I quite like Lan and Moraine and Rand a lot. And I do like Perrin too, and I understand what they're doing with him, and he's so internal in the books that I think it would be extremely difficult for a viewer to get what's going on with him without having something like what happened to him to be able to create this, I don't know, air of hesitancy and fear and anxiety around stuff and sadness that he is carrying. So I don't know. They maybe could have done that differently. It was extreme, but and also an extreme change from the book. And I know some people are struggling with that there's this massive shift in a couple of these characters and some of the things that have happened to them. And it does feel like large changes, but we have to keep in mind that I think they're making these changes in a purposeful way to help convey stuff down the road. So before I jump into the pros, I want to talk about some good things of what I pulled out of the show. I want to take a minute to thank my patrons. Patreon.com/Corey Lansdale. Thank you very much to all my patrons for being a part of my artistic journey and for partnering with me there. I would encourage you all to go check me out on Patreon and consider supporting my efforts in creating this fan art for the Wheel of Time and for Stormlight Archives and Lord of the Rings and all the stuff that I'm doing. If you like the work, you can partner with me for as little as $1 a month. And I know it's not much, but it makes a big difference to me, and I greatly appreciate the interaction with my patrons there. You can also find me on @ThirdAgeArt on Instagram and @Corey Lansdale at Twitter. Please just connect with me on all these channels, and of course subscribe here on YouTube, drop a comment, and would love to keep up with you all. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about some positive things that I picked up from the show. It wasn't all negative, and I do think that they're going to make some payoffs. I do hope so anyways, that there's going to be the payoff to some of the stuff that they've set up in the first few episodes here, as I mentioned. So for me, a couple of positives about the show, really positive things. The character acting, I really am appreciating and enjoying the characters being brought to life. I really feel like they cast them very well, and I feel like the actors are carrying the characters well. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any one moment where I felt like the characters were like really abhorrent. Of course, with the changes to Matt's background and also Perrin's background, there's a little bit of a nuance change to the way that they're going to be perceived from me on screen and probably from other people who have read the books. But I feel like they're carrying that well, and I'm okay with that. Maybe Tom was a bit of an interesting introduction, the way that they brought him in. I love the actor for him. It just feels a bit different than the books, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I guess time will tell with that. I did like kind of how he was interacting with Matt. There was a bit of very cheeky Gleeman stuff going on there, stealing his money, not giving him the money back, and then sort of after Matt had looted the body of the Aiel, I think the Gleeman, Tom overheard him kind of apologizing for taking it and explaining why he had to, and Tom seemed very sympathetic to that, and that was kind of an interesting little dynamic to their interactions. And then he gave him the money back. I don't know if he intended to from the start. So I gotta update something here. I just went back and watched the scene in episode 3. It turns out that he didn't give the money back to Matt. Matt stole it back, which was clever. I kind of liked that. But his intention was to give it back after he had became acquaintances with him. And I liked how he parted before he then came and knifed her in the throat. But so I still feel like my comments stand on that interaction between Tom and the boys. And there's some interesting sort of... I like the way, one rogue to another, that respect that was kind of shared between them. I'm okay with this. I think this is going to work. That's it. Or what his deal is at this point, but I found that interaction quite interesting between those characters. I feel like Rand, for me in particular, is really tight. I'm enjoying him quite a bit. Other than... I kind of wish that he and Egwene weren't romantically involved at the start, but again, these are changes that I understand why they've made them. They've had to make these changes to sort of accelerate things and to bring viewers in. So I'm okay with it. Another positive of the show is the world. Some of the scenery is really beautiful, really amazing, and I'm really into what they're doing in terms of fleshing out the world at large. So the costuming and settings are quite picturesque and pretty. The Trollocs I really enjoyed. I know some of the CGI is a little bit could be polished up a bit, but in general I've found the Trollocs to be quite enjoyable, very horrific and terrifying. They're really leaning into the horror aspect of the story and the villains, which I think is working. I was sweating in episode 1. My palms were sweating just watching everything unfold there. They feel a lot different than, like, for example, the Uruk-hai in The Lord of the Rings, where, like Pippin and Merry are chucking rocks at their great helms and they're falling down from a clang on the head from a rock. And so these Trollocs don't feel like that. They feel genuinely terrifying, like they're going to eat me at any moment, and I've appreciated that for sure. I mean, I don't want to get eaten. It's not that I appreciate the idea of something eating me, but it works in the film, in the show. So I've been enjoying that, and even the little glimpses of the Dark One, and even Dana, the barkeep, innkeeper, and the sort of introduction of a dark friend. That I felt all that stuff was quite well handled, and my family were all shocked when she turned out to be what she was, and they were like, what is going on? And they thought it was quite interesting, not coming into it a little bit more fresh. They're like, oh wow, that's intense that somebody is serving the Dark Lord and has this opinion and viewpoint on things. So I think those aspects of stuff give me hope for the rest of the series. I think they're moving in a good direction. And those were some really positive things that I pulled out of it. So I'm really curious to know what you all think. Would be delighted if you put a comment in the comments here. If you're interested in any of the pieces that you've been seeing being created while this is unfolding, you can find them, most of them on my Etsy store, and if there's nothing there, you can just direct message me through my Instagram at ThirdAgeArt, and we can chat about getting you a print. I put videos up all the time on my Patreon channel every month. They're not about reviews and stuff like this, they're more specifically about the artwork and about my processes in art. Although this month I did do a little mini review on there about everything that we've kind of talked about here. But yeah, please check all those things out. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, you guys, I will see you later. Just wanted to let you know quickly that this limited edition print is available in my Etsy store. You can find it on etsy.com and just search for Corey Lansdell. I'll put a link in the description below. But was happy to put this one together in partnership with Prime Video UK.